Let's start with this quote from Woodrow Wilson. It was from back in the year 1913, quoting, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." Last week I quoted excerpts from a 1984 interview with host G. Edward Griffin. He had on his program a Russian KGB defector by the name of Yuri Bezmenov, in which he explains the 4 stages of subverting the free world. What I want to do today is quote excerpts from an earlier video of G. Edward Griffin. You can find this online. He explains how communists have had plans, listen, to use racial agitation, violence, and socialism for a communist revolution in America. Listen to these excerpts, quoting. "As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races. And they don't care how they get it or whom they use, even if children necessary." He then goes on to hold up a book entitled "Color, Communism, and Common Sense" by an author named Manning Johnson. Quoting Griffin, he joined the party, speaking of the Communist Party in America, as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people, the black people. He was a dedicated communist, and eventually he rose to one of the highest ranks. But after many years, he discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people in a bloody revolution to destroy America. Communists call not only for extensive chaos within the cities, but for putting to the torch every village, every forest, every field, and every barn. The plan? The plan is for raging fires from one city to the next. The reason? Well, first, there's the value of sheer destruction. Secondly, it would force us to deploy our defenses and rescue units over the widest possible area. The communists point out that as long as our police and National Guard remain concentrated, they're invincible. But if they can be forced to spread out over the entire city and into the countryside as well, then they can be picked off from ambush one by one. And the third value of massive fire to the communists is psychological. Listen to this. This hit me hard. The average American is soft and decadent. And when he sees billows of black smoke rising from one horizon to the other, he'll become paralyzed with fear and panic and will run away and hide and do nothing to interfere with the guerrilla bands as they strike at the community's power centers. Black rebellion was what Moscow wanted. Bloody racial conflict would split America. During the confusion and demoralization, we talked about this last week, panic would set in. Then finally, street fights become frequent under the leadership of the Communist Party. Workers organized revolutionary committees to be in command of the uprising armed workers and seized, listen to this, the principal government offices. I watched an absolutely heartbreaking and chilling video of what's really happening in Seattle. Apparently, there was a couple of homicides, and the police are not responding. Sadly, this seems to be working because police officers are now resigning. And so, but it's even worse than that. Some of the things that are happening within this area in Seattle that they have seized according to this whole agenda, that was the plan all along. Well, from the pulpit, I dare not get too graphic, but suffice it to say that it is like it was in Lot's day and like it was in the days of Noah. I mean, it's evil, it is demonic, it is satanic, what is happening. There was another video I saw, I couldn't watch it all the way through. This woman who was inside the area, they call it CHOP now, it was Chaz, is, weeping, almost convulsing, pleading with people. She said, you have no idea what's happening in here. Well, Griffin continues. He says, this all-out minority revolution must create a state of crisis wherein almost all of the male population would be forced to remain in their homes to protect their property and families. The middle class is very large, but it is not accustomed to deprivation and terror. Because of its affluence, it has waxed soft. It has no stomach for massive fire, blood, and violence. And then he says this, listen to this. The motive force behind its life drive, speaking of the affluent, soft American, the motive force behind its life drive is its endless pursuit of prestige, conspicuous consumption, and sensuous pleasure. Dare I say, I'm sad to say, that not only is this an apt description of this nation, but sadly it is also an apt description of the church of Jesus Christ in this nation. A few years of violent, sporadic, and highly destructive uprisings will set the stage for the grand finale. After the stage is properly set through protracted struggle, America could be brought to her knees in 90 days. Think about that. Think about this. Think about 90 days ago. How much has happened in 90 days? It was about 90 days ago that everything went into lockdown. Ladies and gentlemen, they have one and only one solution for all problems. More government, and then more until it's total government. And forgive me for saying it one more time, total government is communism.